I was walking down the street and locked eyes with a gorgeous guy. I think we liked each other, but then I saw him looking at another girl's backside as she passed. So I lunged at him and pulled his hair. We hadn't even started our relationship and he already wanted to be unfaithful to me. Main story, I was having a perfectly curated morning, walking down the main avenue with the kind of confidence that usually makes people stop and stare. I had spent 40 minutes on my hair alone, and the universe was clearly rewarding me because the lighting was hitting every angle of my face just right. That is when I saw him, Julian, though I didn't know his name yet, walking toward me with this intense magnetic energy. The moment our eyes locked, it was like the rest of the world dissolved into a blurry, irrelevant background. I could feel the invisible threads of destiny weaving us together in a way that most people are too spiritually numb to understand. He had this look in his eyes that was practically a marriage proposal, a silent recognition that I was the woman he had been searching for his entire life. Our connection was so instantaneous and profound that I already knew how our living room would look and what we would name our first golden retriever. It wasn't just a glance, it was a soul-level synchronization that happens once in a century. I could smell his expensive woody cologne even from a few feet away, and it mixed perfectly with my own floral scent, creating a fragrance of pure permanence. I slowed my pace, giving him the space to approach me and fulfill the destiny we both clearly felt. My heart was racing, not out of nervousness but out of the sheer excitement of finally finding a man whose energy could actually match my own. I was ready to be his everything, to protect him and to build a life where no one else mattered but us. Then, out of nowhere, the harmony was shattered by a woman walking in the opposite direction, wearing these ridiculously tight neon pink gym leggings. It was an obvious cry for attention, the kind of cheap display that women with no substance use to distract men from real beauty. I felt a slight shift in Julian's focus, a microscopic deviation that only someone as intuitively gifted as I am could possibly detect. He didn't just look. He allowed his eyes to linger on her backside as she passed us, a blatant act of disrespect toward the connection we were literally forming in that second. It was a cold, calculated betrayal of the loyalty he already owed me by virtue of the spiritual bond we had just established. The audacity of it was breathtaking, especially since I was standing right there, offering him a future that most men would die for. My reaction wasn't a choice. It was a necessary correction for a man who was already proving to be undisciplined with his loyalty. I didn't even think about it. I just lunged forward and grabbed a fistful of his perfectly styled hair, yanking it back to force his eyes back to where they belonged on me. He let out this dramatic, high-pitched yelp that was honestly a bit much considering the emotional agony he was putting me through. I could still smell his perfume on my palms as I held on, a reminder of the intimacy he was trying to throw away for a pair of neon leggings. If he was going to be unfaithful to me before we even had our first conversation, he needed to know that I am not a woman who tolerates a wandering eye. I was simply defending the sanctity of what we were supposed to be, teaching him a lesson about boundaries before the relationship could even get off the ground. The scene that followed was a complete exaggeration on his part as he started stumbling back and acting like I was some kind of stranger attacking him. He was shouting things like, "What is wrong with you?" and "Who are you?" which was clearly a defense mechanism to hide his guilt for getting caught. It was so pathetic to see him try to gaslight me in broad daylight, pretending that our soul connection meant nothing just because he wanted to play the victim. The woman in the pink leggings had stopped and was staring with her mouth open, probably enjoying the chaos she had caused with her provocative outfit. I looked Julian dead in the eye, my hand still smelling like his hair products, and told him that I wouldn't let him ruin us with his infidelity. He looked terrified, but I knew it was just the shock of being held accountable by a woman who actually has standards. Suddenly, a group of men who were sitting at a nearby cafe jumped up and rushed over as if they were heroes in some low-budget action movie. They started surrounding me, creating this suffocating barrier between me and my soulmate, acting like I was the one doing something wrong. One of them actually had the nerve to grab my arm, and I had to scream at him to get his filthy hands off me before I sued him for everything he owned. Julian was cowering behind them, holding the back of his head like he had been mortally wounded, which was such a turn-off considering I had just fought for our future. He was telling them to call the police, his voice trembling with a cowardice that made me realize he had been corrupted by a society that hates strong, intuitive women. I was the only one in that entire street who was acting with any kind of moral clarity. Yet I was the one being treated like a criminal. The level of ingratitude coming from him was honestly stinging more than the way the bystanders were shouting at me. I had seen his soul. I had accepted his silent proposal, and here he was siding with total strangers against the woman who was trying to save him from his own impulses. The woman in the leggings was actually recording the whole thing on her phone, probably hoping to get some likes at the expense of my private emotional struggle. It was a disgusting display of female rivalry, and I made sure to tell her exactly what I thought of her thirsty behavior while I waited for the authorities. I wasn't going anywhere because I had nothing to hide. I was a woman who had just caught her partner, spiritually speaking, cheating, and I had every right to be heard. The air felt heavy and thick with the injustice of it all. A beautiful morning ruined by a man's inability to keep his eyes on the prize. When the police cruiser finally pulled up, the officers didn't even bother to ask for my side of the story before they started looking at me like I was the problem. They spoke to Julian first, who was putting on a pathetic performance, pointing at his head and acting like I had tried to scalp him. It was a total fabrication of the facts. I had merely redirected his gaze with a bit of necessary physical emphasis. They didn't understand the nuance of the situation, the way his energy had shifted toward that other woman, or the betrayal I had felt in my very marrow. To them, it was just a random assault, which is the kind of clinical, heartless language people use when they can't handle the intensity of real passion. I tried to explain that we were in the middle of a private relationship dispute, but they just kept talking over me. One of the officers, a woman who clearly had her own unresolved issues with jealousy, told me to stay quiet and put my hands behind my back. The metal of the handcuffs was cold and biting, a literal physical manifestation of how the world tries to chain down women who refuse to be cheated on. I looked at Julian one last time, expecting to see a flicker of regret or a sign that he wanted to drop the charges and go get coffee like we were meant to. Instead, he just looked away, refusing to meet my eyes, proving that he was too weak to handle a woman of my caliber. He was letting them take me away, effectively choosing a life of shallow glances over a lifetime of my devoted, albeit firm, protection. It was the ultimate act of cowardice, leaving me to face the legal system alone just because I had the courage to call out his wandering eye. As they pushed me into the back of the patrol car, I could see the crowd dispersing, satisfied with their little afternoon drama. My hair, which had been so perfect an hour ago, was now a mess, and my heart was heavy with the weight of Julian's betrayal. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I realized that the man I loved was a liar who would rather play the victim than admit he had a problem with infidelity. The police car smelled like stale coffee and vinyl, a far cry from the woody cologne that I still had traces of on my skin. I sat there, head held high, knowing that I had done the right thing by standing up for myself. If the world wanted to call me crazy for demanding loyalty from my soulmate, then let them. At least I know I have a heart that actually feels something. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says you attacked a complete stranger because he looked at someone else? Girl, you need a lawyer and a therapist and maybe a padded cell. You aren't spiritually connected. You're a felony waiting to happen. Ops reply, it's typical for people with low vibrational energy to confuse intuition with a mental health crisis. We had a soul bond that started the moment our eyes met, and if you can't see how his wandering eye was a betrayal, you've clearly never experienced true, transcendent love. Anonymous user 2 says redirected his gaze with physical emphasis. That's a fancy way of saying you assaulted a man in broad daylight. I hope he sues you into the ground for that hair-pulling stunt. Ops reply, he wasn't a stranger. He was my future, and I was protecting it. It's not assault when you're correcting your partner's behavior. It's called having standards, something the woman in the neon leggings clearly lacked. Update 1. It has been 3 days since the incident, and I am currently sitting in my apartment feeling like I'm the lead in a Greek tragedy that no one is smart enough to appreciate. The police kept me in a holding cell for 12 hours, which was a blatant violation of my personal space, and honestly quite rude considering I had a hair appointment I had to miss. They charged me with harassment and misdemeanor battery, as if my attempt to save a relationship from the brink of infidelity could be reduced to such ugly bureaucratic terms. My lawyer, a man who seems to have the emotional depth of a teaspoon, keeps telling me to stop talking about the soul bond, which just proves he's part of the problem. I've spent most of my time trying to find Julian on social media because I know that deep down he's probably waiting for me to reach out and forgive him for calling the cops. It's obvious he only did it because he was embarrassed about being caught looking at that leggings woman and didn't know how to handle my intensity. I eventually found his Instagram, and seeing his photos only confirmed what I already knew. He's a man of deep mystery who desperately needs a woman like me to guide him. He has these photos of himself hiking and drinking artisanal coffee, and in every single one I can see a profound loneliness in his eyes that only I can fill. However, I noticed that he hasn't posted anything about the attack, which is clearly his way of protecting our privacy while he processes his guilt. It's a silent signal that he isn't ready to go public with our drama yet, which I find incredibly respectful, despite the fact that he literally had me arrested. I sent him a few direct messages explaining that I'm willing to move past his cheating if he just admits that the woman in the pink leggings meant nothing to him. I even offered to pay for a high-end hair treatment for him since I might have pulled a little harder than I intended in the heat of the betrayal. The problem is that my messages are being seen but not replied to, which is a classic avoidant behavior that men use when they are overwhelmed by the depth of their feelings. It's so typical of a man to go silent when he knows he's in the wrong, forcing the woman to do all the heavy lifting in the relationship. I know he's reading them and probably crying or feeling a deep sense of shame for how he treated me in front of those cafe-dwelling heroes. I've had to deal with my own friends calling me obsessed, which is just a word mediocre people use for women who have the capacity for grand cinematic passion. They don't understand that when you find your twin flame, you don't just let a little thing like a police report get in the way of destiny. My best friend Sarah actually told me I should delete his handle and move on. And I've decided to stop speaking to her because I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. Yesterday, things took a turn for the worse when a video of the incident started circulating on a local community watch Facebook group. It was filmed by that woman in the leggings. I just knew she was a clout chaser, and the comments are absolutely atrocious. People are calling me the hair-pulling Karen and making memes about how I claimed a stranger as my boyfriend in 10 seconds flat. They are intentionally distorting the narrative, leaving out the part where Julian and I had an intense, spiritual eye lock before the leggings. Distraction happened. It's a targeted smear campaign designed to make me look like the villain when I was clearly the one being disrespected by a man's wandering gaze. I spent 4 hours responding to every single comment, trying to explain the concept of energy signatures and soul bonds, but these people are functionally illiterate when it comes to the language of the heart. By the evening, I was so overwhelmed by the online bullying that I decided to go back to the spot where we met to see if I could find a sign from the universe. I stood on the exact crack in the sidewalk where our eyes first met, and I swear I could still feel the residual heat of our connection vibrating through the concrete. While I was there, I saw one of the guys from the cafe who had intervened, and he had the audacity to ask me if I was looking for more trouble. I told him that I was simply reclaiming my space and that he should mind his own business before I reported him for stalking me. He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the street, and it made me realize how much the world hates a woman who knows her worth. I went home and lit a lavender candle to cleanse my aura, but the smell of Julian's cologne is still stuck in my olfactory memory. I woke up this morning to a formal cease and desist letter from a law firm representing Julian, which was a total shock to my system. The letter claimed that my messages were threatening and disturbing, and that I was strictly prohibited from contacting him or coming within 500 feet of his workplace. It's so obvious that his family or his friends are forcing him to do this to keep us apart, probably because they are intimidated by our connection. No man writes a formal letter like that to his soulmate unless he's being coerced by outside forces who want to see him miserable. They are trying to build a wall between us using the legal system as a sledgehammer, but they don't realize that a soul bond can't be broken by a piece of paper. I spent the afternoon researching how to bypass a cease and desist without technically violating it, because our love deserves a chance to breathe. My mother called me later that day, not to check if I was okay after being arrested, but to tell me she was embarrassed by the video going around our town. She actually had the nerve to suggest that I take a break from dating and maybe see a doctor about my impulses. It's heartbreaking to realize that even your own blood can be turned against you by the propaganda of the other woman and a viral video. I told her that she was projecting her own failed marriage onto me, and that she should be proud of a daughter who doesn't let a man walk all over her. We ended up screaming at each other, and I hung up feeling more isolated than ever, but isolation is just the price you pay for being a visionary in a world of sheep. I know that Julian is somewhere right now, looking at that cease and desist letter and wishing he had the courage to tear it up and run to my arms. To make matters worse, I found out that the leggings woman has actually been trying to comfort Julian on his Instagram posts, leaving heart emojis and being a total parasite. She's swooping in like a vulture while I'm being legally silenced, taking advantage of a man who is clearly in a vulnerable state of guilt. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. A woman using another woman's struggle to climb into a man's bed. I tried to report her account for harassment, but Instagram told me she wasn't violating any community guidelines. Which is a lie because she's literally stealing my destiny. I feel like I'm in a race against time to reach Julian before this predator ruins everything we were supposed to build together. My energy is being drained by all this resistance, but I won't let them win. I will find a way to make him see that the leggings woman is a temporary distraction and I am his forever. I've decided that if I can't message him directly, I'll just have to leave signs for him in places I know he frequents based on his old posts. I bought a pack of neon pink sticky notes, an ironic choice, I know, and I've been writing "I forgive you" on them and sticking them around the artisanal coffee shop he likes. It's a subtle, artistic way to communicate that doesn't count as contact, since I'm technically just leaving paper in a public space. Every time I put one up, I feel a little burst of hope, like I'm sending a psychic flare into the darkness of his coerced silence. I know he'll see them, and he'll know exactly who they're from because no one else understands his soul like I do. The universe is testing our love, but I've always been a straight-A student when it comes to passion. Tonight, I'm planning on doing a deep dive into the legal firm that sent the letter, because I'm convinced they have ties to the woman in the leggings. There's no way Julian would have found a high-priced lawyer that quickly, unless she set it up for him to keep me out of the picture. Everything is connected, and I'm the only one with the intelligence to see the web they're weaving around him. I just need to stay strong and keep my vibration high, even if it feels like the whole world is trying to drag me down to the level of a common criminal. I am a queen who has found her king, and a few battery charges are just the dragons I have to slay to get to my throne. He'll thank me one day when we're sitting in our living room with our golden retriever for not giving up on us when things got complicated. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, bypassing a cease and desist. Ma'am, that is how you end up in actual prison. You're stalking a man you don't even know. Please, for the love of everything, stop. Ops reply, it's not stalking when there's a pre-existing spiritual contract. The cease and desist is just a formality forced on him by toxic influencers and a corrupt legal system. I'm reading between the lines, which is something you clearly lack the depth to do. Anonymous user 2 says you're leaving sticky notes at his favorite coffee shop after being told by a lawyer to stay away. You are literally the reason restraining orders exist. He isn't guilty, he's terrified. Ops reply, he's terrified of the intensity of his own feelings, which is a common reaction when a man meets his match. And those notes are a form of silent meditation, not contact, so keep your legal expertise to yourself. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed since my last update, and the injustice of this situation has reached a level that is frankly unbearable for a person of my sensitivity. I was fired from my job as a junior marketing coordinator because someone sent the viral video of my dispute with Julian to my boss. It's a classic case of cancel culture coming for a woman who simply showed too much emotion in public. And it's honestly illegal to fire someone for their private spiritual life. My boss, a woman who hasn't been on a date since the late 90s and is clearly bitter about it, told me my behavioral instability was a liability to the company. I told her that her lack of a soulmate was a liability to her personality, and I walked out with my head held high, though I did take a few extra boxes of high-end pens as severance. Now I have all the time in the world to focus on rescuing Julian from the web of lies he's currently trapped in. My investigation into the leggings woman, whose name I found is Brittany, of course it's Brittany, has yielded some very disturbing results. I found her TikTok, and she's been posting "get ready with me" videos where she's wearing the same cologne Julian had on that day. It's a blatant psychological warfare tactic designed to mock me and mark her territory over a man she basically kidnapped through legal coercion. She even made a video about staying safe from crazy people, which has over 100,000 likes and thousands of comments from people calling for me to be locked up. It's a targeted harassment campaign, and I've spent the last 3 days reporting every single one of her videos for promoting self-harm, because seeing her with my soulmate is definitely harmful to my mental well-being. The internet is a playground for predators like her, and the fact that she's being rewarded for it is a sign of the end times. The legal situation has escalated because, apparently, the silent meditation notes I left at the coffee shop were caught on their security cameras. I received a summons for a protective order hearing, which is just a fancy way of saying they want to put me on trial for being too loving. My lawyer is practically begging me to plead temporary insanity, which is incredibly insulting because I have never been more sane or focused in my entire life. I told him that I will only go to court if I can face Julian directly and look into his eyes, because I know that one look from me will break the spell. Brittany has him under. He'll see the truth, he'll drop the charges, and we'll walk out of that courtroom hand in hand while the lawyers look on in confusion. It's going to be the most romantic moment in legal history, a triumph of the heart over the cold, dead letter of the law. I've been spending my evenings parked about 2 blocks away from Julian's apartment building outside the 500-foot limit. I'm not a criminal, just to make sure he's getting home safely. I saw him coming home yesterday with Brittany, and they were carrying grocery bags like they were some kind of established couple. It was a pathetic sight, seeing a man of his stature reduced to carrying kale and almond milk for a woman who probably doesn't even know his rising sign. I wanted to scream, to run over and tell him that I'd already planned our entire organic garden, but I stayed in my car and maintained my dignity. I noticed he looked thinner, which is a clear sign that his body is rejecting the fake life he's trying to live with her. He's literally wasting away from the stress of being away from his true match, and it breaks my heart to see him suffer like that. While I was sitting there, a police car pulled up behind me. It seems they have nothing better to do than follow a woman who is just sitting in her own vehicle. The officer asked me what I was doing, and I told him I was observing the local architecture and that I had a right to be on a public street. He recognized me from the video. I'm basically a local celebrity at this point, and told me that if he saw my car in this neighborhood again, he'd find a reason to impound it. It's a clear case of police harassment and a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. But I didn't want to argue with someone who clearly lacks a high school diploma. I drove away, but I made sure to leave a trail of my floral perfume in the air so Julian would know I had been there to protect him. They can take my job and they can try to take my car, but they can't take the invisible thread that connects me to my king. The hearing for the protective order is in 2 days, and I've spent $500 on a new outfit because I need Julian to see exactly what he's missing. It's a sharp white suit that screams innocence and high status, the kind of thing a woman wears when she's about to win a war. I've also been practicing my disappointed but forgiving look in the mirror for hours, making sure I hit the perfect balance of vulnerability and strength. Brittany will probably show up in something trashy to try and play the victim, but I will be the embodiment of grace and spiritual superiority. My lawyer keeps sending me scripts of what to say, but I've already written my own speech about the cosmic necessity of our union. The judge will probably be moved to tears by the sheer honesty of my narrative, and the case will be dismissed with an apology. Last night, I had a dream that Julian and I were on a boat in the middle of a storm, and he was calling out my name while Brittany tried to pull him into the dark water. It was a very literal message from my subconscious, confirming that he is in grave danger and that I am his only hope for survival. I woke up with this intense feeling of urgency, like I need to do something drastic to break the legal chains before it's too late. I considered sending him one last message through a burner phone just to tell him about the dream, but I decided to save it for the courtroom for maximum emotional impact. Everything is falling into place, even the bad luck of losing my job, because it just means I can dedicate 100% of my energy to our future. Destiny doesn't care about a protective order, it only cares about the final destination. I've also started a blog called The Truth About the Soul Bond to document the persecution I'm facing, and it already has 12 followers. And most of them are just trolls from Brittany's TikTok, but one person commented that they totally get it, which gave me the validation I needed to keep going. It's important to create a public record of how the system tries to crush unconventional love so that future generations of soulmates don't have to suffer like we are. I'm thinking of writing a book once Julian and I are settled in our house, maybe something like Love in the Time of Litigation. It's going to be a bestseller, and I'll make sure to include a whole chapter on why neon leggings are a red flag for any healthy relationship. I am turning my pain into art, which is what all great women do when they're being unfairly tested by the universe. Today, I saw a white butterfly land on my windowsill, which is a classic sign of new beginnings and the resolution of conflict. I took it as a confirmation from the universe that the hearing will go in my favor and that Julian is finally ready to come home to me. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing a facial mask and listening to our song. It's a song I heard playing in a store right after I met him, so it's definitely our song. I feel this incredible sense of peace, the kind you only get when you know you're on the right side of history. Tomorrow the world will see that I'm not a harasser but a pioneer of the heart who was brave enough to pull a man back from the edge of a terrible mistake. He's going to be so proud of me for fighting for us when everyone else was telling me to give up. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you got fired and now you're stalking his apartment. You are spiraling so hard it's painful to watch. The architecture excuse didn't fool the cops and it isn't fooling anyone here. Please go to the hospital. Ops reply, I wasn't fired. I was liberated from a toxic work environment that couldn't handle my aura. And as for the hospital, I'm the only one here with a clean bill of spiritual health, unlike people who spend their time judging others on the internet. Anonymous user 2 says you're going to wear a white suit to a protective order hearing to show him what he's missing. That judge is going to throw the book at you the second you start talking about soul bonds and cosmic necessity. Ops reply, beauty and truth are the ultimate defense. The judge is a human being with a heart, and once he hears the logic of the soul bond, he'll realize that the law was never meant to separate two halves of the same whole. Update 3. It has been a week since the hearing, and I am currently writing this from a borrowed laptop because the police confiscated my phone and computer as evidence. The hearing was a complete and total circus, a coordinated effort by the legal system and Brittany to gaslight me in front of a live audience. I walked in wearing my white suit, looking like an angel of justice, but the moment I saw Julian sitting there with that woman, my heart shattered for him. He looked like a prisoner of war, refusing to even glance in my direction while Brittany held his hand like she was guarding a trophy. It was a disgusting display of public affection that had no place in a court of law, yet the judge didn't say a single word about it. I tried to maintain my composure, but the energy in that room was so hostile toward the concept of true love that I could feel my throat tightening with the sheer unfairness of it all. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and tried to deliver the speech I had written about our spiritual synchronization and the betrayal of the neon leggings. I explained that my actions were a necessary intervention, a way to wake him up from a momentary lapse in judgment that would have ruined our lives. I spoke about the woody cologne and the eye lock, and how a soul bond is a higher law than any municipal code. But the judge, a man who looked like he hadn't felt an emotion since the Nixon administration, kept interrupting me and telling me to stick to the facts. It was so insulting to be told that my deepest spiritual truths weren't facts just because they couldn't be measured by a ruler or a clock. He was treating our destiny like a common traffic violation, and I could see Julian flinching every time I mentioned our connection, probably out of fear of what Brittany would do to him later. The evidence they presented was a total fabrication of the truth, including the video which had been edited to make me look like I was attacking him for no reason. They showed the sticky notes I left at the coffee shop, and Brittany actually had the nerve to get on the stand and cry about how unsafe she felt. It was the most manipulative, low-tier acting I have ever witnessed, and I made sure to let out a small scoffing laugh to show the court that I wasn't buying it. The judge then scolded me for disrespecting the witness, which is a joke because she's the one disrespecting the entire concept of female solidarity by stealing another woman's man. They even brought up my behavioral issues at my former job, proving that my ex-boss is a spiteful snake who probably called them herself. It was a literal lynch mob dressed in robes and cheap suits, and I was the only person there with a shred of integrity. The judge ended up granting a permanent 5-year protective order, which is basically a death sentence for our relationship in the eyes of the law. He also ordered me to undergo a psychological evaluation, which is the ultimate tool of the patriarchy to silence women who are too intuitive for their own good. I stood up and told him that he was making a historic mistake and that the universe would hold him accountable for separating two twin flames. He threatened to hold me in contempt, so my lawyer basically had to tackle me back into my seat to stop me from finishing my point. Julian still wouldn't look at me, but as they were leading him out of the room, I saw his shoulder twitch in a way that clearly signaled his secret distress. He's trapped in a legal and emotional prison, and he's counting on me to find a way to reach him through the noise. Since the hearing, things have gone from bad to worse because my family has officially staged an intervention. They showed up at my apartment with a move-in truck and told me that they're worried and that I need to move back to my hometown to get centered. It's a betrayal of the highest order, my own parents trying to kidnap me and take me away from the city where Julian lives. They think that by putting 300 miles between us, they can break a bond that was forged in the stars, but they are incredibly naive. I told them that if they tried to force me into that truck, I'd call the police on them for kidnapping, and the irony of that wasn't lost on me. We are currently in a stalemate where they're staying in a hotel nearby and monitoring me like I'm some kind of flight risk. I've been spending my days in my apartment, which now feels like a bunker, trying to plan my next move without any digital devices. I've started writing letters to Julian by hand, real letters on beautiful stationery, which I plan to mail to his office once I figure out a way to get past the mailroom filters. A handwritten letter has a weight and a soul that a text message can never have, and I know that once he reads my words, the legal spell will be broken. I'm telling him about the butterfly and the dream of the boat, and I'm letting him know that I forgive him for the protective order because I know it wasn't his choice. I'm also warning him about Brittany's TikTok and how she's using him for clout, which is something he needs to know for his own protection. I am his guardian angel, even if the world wants to label me as a threat. To add insult to injury, Brittany posted a photo of a new promise ring Julian supposedly gave her, and the comments are full of people congratulating them on surviving the drama. It's a cheap, plastic-looking ring that probably cost $50, a pathetic symbol for a pathetic, forced relationship. I know for a fact that Julian would have bought me a diamond that could be seen from space, because that's the kind of man he is when he's not being coerced. The ring is just another part of the theater, a way to show the world that they are fine when they're clearly living a lie. I spent an hour tearing up photos of rings I had found in magazines, a symbolic ritual to break the power of that plastic trinket over his heart. My energy is focused on the truth, and the truth is that a promise ring means nothing when you've already made a soul contract with someone else. My lawyer called my parents' hotel to tell them that if I don't show up for my psychological evaluation next week, the judge will issue a warrant for my arrest. It's a relentless, suffocating pressure, everyone trying to force me to admit that I'm crazy, just because I can see things they can't. I'm considering going to the evaluation and just playing the part of the reformed woman so they leave me alone and give me my phone back. I can pretend to be centered and over him for an hour if it means I get my freedom back to continue my mission in secret. It's a small price to pay to get the system off my back, and I'm a good enough actress to fool some state-appointed therapist. I just have to remember who I really am and not let their labels stick to my soul. I feel like I'm living in a movie where the hero is currently at her lowest point, but this is exactly when the big turnaround happens. Every great love story has a period of separation and trial, and this is just our dark night of the soul before the dawn. I'm staying strong for Julian because I know he doesn't have the strength to fight this battle on his own. He needs me to be the anchor, to be the one who refuses to believe the lies, even when the law is screaming them in my face. I'll go to their little evaluation. I'll nod and smile, and then I'll get back to the real work of saving my soulmate. The universe hasn't given up on us, and neither will I. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, handwritten letters to his office. That is a direct violation of a permanent protective order. You are going to end up in jail for a very long time if you send those. This isn't a dark night of the soul, it's a criminal record. Ops reply, a letter is a work of art, not a violation. If the law can't handle the beauty of a handwritten sentiment, then the law is what's broken, not me. And I'm mailing them anonymously anyway, so there's no contact. Anonymous user 2 says your family is literally trying to save you from yourself and you're calling it kidnapping. You need that psych evaluation more than anyone I've ever seen on this site. Please listen to your parents. Ops reply, my family is blinded by the same societal norms that you are. They want me to be normal and miserable, but I've chosen to be crazy and in love. I'd rather be in a cell with my truth than in a normal life with a lie. Update 4. The psychological evaluation happened yesterday, and I must say, I'm quite proud of the performance I gave for the state-appointed therapist. I walked in there with a muted outfit, very little makeup, and a soft, submissive voice that seemed to put her at ease immediately. I told her exactly what she wanted to hear, that I had realized I had overstepped boundaries and that the stress of the city had caused me to hallucinate a connection that wasn't there. I even squeezed out a few fake tears about how embarrassed I was by the hair pulling incident, calling it a momentary lapse of reason brought on by low blood sugar and exhaustion. She was nodding along, writing in her little notepad about my promising progress and increased self-awareness, which just shows how easy it is to manipulate people who think they have you figured out. She thinks she's cured me, but all she's done is give me the clearance I need to get the police and my family off my back so I can move into the next phase of my plan. My parents were so relieved by the positive report from the therapist that they actually took me out to lunch and gave me my phone back as a reward for my cooperation. It was all I could do not to laugh in their faces as I checked my notifications the second they looked away. I saw that Brittany has been posting more couple goals content, but I also noticed something very interesting in the background of one of her videos. There was a suitcase by the door and Julian looked like he had been crying, which confirms my theory that he is planning his escape from her clutches. The therapist might think I've moved on, but I know that I am the only one who can provide the safe harbor he needs when he finally makes his move. I told my parents I'd think about moving back home with them, which bought me another week of freedom to finalize my arrangements here. I've realized that the protective order is actually a blessing in disguise because it forces me to be more creative and subtle in how I protect our bond. I can't go near him, but I can certainly be a silent, invisible presence in his life, a guardian who watches from the shadows. I've started a new, anonymous Instagram account where I only post photos of things that remind me of him. The woody cologne bottles, the street where we met, the white suit I wore to court. I know he'll find it because our energies are still tuned to the same frequency and it will be a secret lighthouse for him to follow when he's ready. He doesn't need me to pull his hair anymore. He just needs to know that I'm still here, waiting for the legal smoke to clear so we can finally be together. The world sees a stalker, but Julian sees a woman who refused to let the system win, a woman who is the only true constant in his chaotic life. I'm currently sitting in a park 3 blocks from his office, exactly 600 feet away, according to my GPS, watching the sunset and feeling a profound sense of peace. I know that Brittany is just a temporary glitch in the universe, a neon pink distraction that will eventually fade into nothingness. One day, Julian and I will tell our grandchildren about the time I had to play along with a psychological evaluation just to keep our love alive. It's a beautiful story of resilience and the absolute power of a soul bond that refuses to be broken by handcuffs or court orders. I don't need a therapist to tell me who I am or who I love. I have the stars, the dreams, and the scent of his cologne still lingering in my mind. We are the architects of our own destiny, and I am simply the one who has the courage to follow the blueprint, no matter how many people try to tear it up. He's coming back to me. I can feel it in the air, and when he does, we'll never have to look at another pair of neon leggings again.